Okay, guys, now that we have deconstructed our question and our stimulus, it is time to get brainstorming on your thesis. Now, as you can see here, I have a page of brainstorming. Now, that's probably taken me probably 15 minutes or so, because what I've ended up with are 6 worded and reworded and revised thesis statements. So it's really important that you don't delete your ideas, have it as a progression, because what you'll see as I quickly go through these is that I use terminology as I continue revising, and I'm still not 100% happy with the final thesis, but it's probably more succinct and sums up what I'm trying to say. Now, a big reminder that your thesis statement is, in essence, your response to the question. So let's pretend in a utopian society that essay writing didn't exist, but you had to answer the question in one sentence. That is what your thesis statement needs to be. Now, what I like to do is actually brainstorm ideas for a thesis statement rather than try to kind of just start writing one. So essentially, my automatic response to the question, which, to remind you, is self-preservation is a key cause of conflict in the novel. So we're commenting on that idea. And in relation to the stimulus, I'm sort of thinking along the lines of that sense of morality that we have, that obligation that we have to one another. My initial ideas were the ultimate conflict in this text, so I'm bringing it back to the actual text of study, is the guilt that's felt by Amir regarding Hassan's rape, and the fact that he didn't do anything. So that's what I'm automatically thinking about, that the ultimate conflict that we see in this text that permeates, his entire existence, and it's established very early on in the text, is that's the ultimate conflict that I would be addressing here. I then sort of moved on to the idea that self-preservation often leads to a betrayal of some kind. And whether that is an inner or an outer conflict that you are responding to, there is some kind of betrayal. And as a result, there is guilt that is felt because of that betrayal that the person, I suppose, has done. So the consequence of knowing better. And in Amir's case, he knew that he should have done something because Hassan has stood up for him time and time again. And so he actually not only betrays Hassan, but he betrays himself. He betrays his own sense of moral obligation. So that's where we're bringing in the stimulus here, all right? We have an innate, an inherent, technically a God-given sense of morality according to this stimulus. It's within us. And so to betray that is a betrayal of oneself. And of course, the consequences of that are that Hassan is abused in the way that he is. And so that's a betrayal of other people. So I sort of brainstorm those ideas and then I start thinking about a really nice, concise way of phrasing that as a statement. And so I'm just going to run these through with you. I'm going to put these notes up as well so you can see them, but because my handwriting is apparently very difficult to read. So the first thing I start with is an acknowledgement of the actual question. While self-preservation is necessary for survival, it often leads to a betrayal of others or even the self. Now, I sort of revise that and I think, I don't really know if I need to have anything about survival. So I get rid of this, right, in my next one. So my next one, number 2, possible thesis statement. Self-preservation is often necessary for survival. So notice how I've actually used a more active language. I have got rid of while. That's what we would call passive language. And I've started with a stronger statement. I've dived straight in to the concept. Self-preservation is often necessary for survival, yet it often leads to a betrayal of others or even the self. Subsequently, and by this point, see, I haven't even finished that sentence, guys, because at this point I was like, I'm waffling. Like, it's too long already. I don't like it. So again, I'm thinking, well, maybe I need to get rid of that, and I'm getting rid of that. All right. So thesis 3, self-preservation often leads to a betrayal of others or even the self. In turn, this creates conflict an individual must face. That one's actually not too bad, but I still felt that it wasn't quite specific enough regarding this concept of conflict, because I was just thinking, is this too broad in relation to the question? Because the question talks broadly about conflict, do I need to specify that? And so then I actually tried to switch the order of it around. Conflict faced by an individual is often the consequence of self-preservation. So that entire section there, guys, that's literally just taken straight from the question, which again, I'm not super happy about, which causes a betrayal of others or even the self. What you'll notice is that this section is consistent throughout. So this is definitely the stronger idea that I'm trying to convey. And you will find that there is something that you keep coming back to. It's just how you're phrasing it. Fifth potential thesis, self-preservation aims to avoid conflict for the self, yet often results in a betrayal of others, which ultimately creates further conflict. I found that was a little bit wordy, particularly with the repetition of self so close together. And so I've got my final and sixth thesis, which I'm not super happy about, but I've got, a few things to choose from now. Self-preservation, when at the cost of others or the morals of the self, I've specified there. So that's actually being a bit more specific than what we've seen before, leads to greater conflict, which it ultimately strove to avoid. So I'm actually commenting here that the self-preservation starts out as something that it tries to avoid conflict. And I'm specifically thinking here, when Amir is aware that Asef and his cronies are there with Hassan, he's thinking, I don't want to get involved because what will they do to me? And so this comes originally from a place that's trying to avoid conflict, but because of the betrayal, it actually leads to greater conflict, which ultimately is that permeating perpetual guilt that he has. All right. And this is where we're going to start off our arguments.